The letter arrived on a Tuesday, sealed with a lawyer's wax stamp, and it burned in Julian Carter's hands like a lit fuse. He stood in his cramped Los Angeles apartment, the Pacific Ocean glinting through the window, unaware that his life was about to unravel. By nightfall, he'd learned his mother, the woman he'd nursed through her cancer for years, had lied, and his late father's will held the key to her betrayal. Julian, 26, a black graphic designer with a quiet intensity, had always been the dutiful son. Growing up in Oakland, he'd watched his mother, Vanessa, a charismatic but volatile woman in her late 40s, navigate life with a flair for drama. She'd raised him alone after his father, Marcus, a reserved accountant, died in a car accident when Julian was 12. Vanessa's tears at the funeral were Oscar-worthy, but her grief seemed to shift overnight into something sharper. Demands for money, guilt trips, and a sudden diagnosis of breast cancer that kept Julian tethered to her side. He'd sent her thousands, skipping college to work, believing every sob-filled voicemail about chemo costs and hospital bills. Now, standing in his apartment, Julian tore open the letter from a law firm in San Francisco. His father's will, long buried in legal limbo, had surfaced. Marcus had left Julian a trust fund, $300,000, locked until his 26th birthday, which had passed 3 weeks ago. The letter detailed assets Vanessa had claimed were lost after Marcus's death. A house in Berkeley, savings, and investments. Julian's heart pounded. Why had she never mentioned this? His phone buzzed. Vanessa. Again, pleading for $5,000 for new treatments. His stomach churned. Something was wrong. He called his best friend, Mateo Alvarez, a 25-year-old Latino barista, an aspiring musician with a quick laugh and a knack for seeing through bullshit. They'd met 2 years ago at a West Hollywood open mic, where Mateo's guitar strumming and Julian's shy smile sparked something undeniable. Now, Mateo was more than a friend, though neither had dared say the word boyfriend yet. "Jules, you gotta confront her," Mateo said, sprawled on Julian's couch, his dark eyes fierce. "This smells like a scam." Julian hesitated, loyalty warring with doubt. Vanessa was his mother, his only family. But the will's words gnawed at him. "To my son, Julian, I leave everything, to be free of her control." That night, Julian drove to Vanessa's small apartment in Inglewood. The air was thick with jasmine and tension as he knocked. Vanessa opened the door, her face pale, a scarf wrapped around her head like a cancer patient's badge. "Baby, you didn't call," she exclaimed, pulling him into a hug that felt rehearsed. Her apartment was cluttered with medical bills, too neat, too staged. Julian's voice shook as he held up the letter. "Why didn't you tell me about Dad's will?" Vanessa's eyes widened, then narrowed. "That's nothing, Julian. Old paperwork. I've been sick, you know that." But her voice cracked, and Julian saw it. A flicker of fear. He pressed harder, asking about the trust fund, the house. Vanessa's story unraveled. The cancer was in remission, she claimed, but she couldn't name her doctor. The bills? Lost in the mail. Julian's chest tightened. He left, her pleas ringing in his ears, and drove straight to Mateo's tiny studio in Echo Park. Mateo pulled him close, their foreheads touching, and whispered, "We'll figure this out together." In that moment, Julian felt anchored, but the storm was just beginning. The next morning, Julian hired a private investigator, a gruff ex-cop named Carla Ruiz, 52, with a no-nonsense vibe and a knack for digging up secrets. Carla's office in downtown LA smelled of coffee and old files. "Give me a week," she said, scanning the will. "If your mom's lying, I'll find the truth." Julian nodded, but dread settled in his bones. What if Vanessa had faked everything? The cancer, the bills, the love? He thought of his father's will, those words, to be free of her control. Had Marcus known something Julian didn't? Over the next few days, Julian and Matteo dug into Vanessa's past. They found hospital records that didn't exist, bank statements showing Julian's money funneled into Vanessa's account, and a neighbor who swore Vanessa had never looked sick. Each discovery was a knife to Julian's heart. Matteo, ever steady, kept him grounded, their late-night talks on the beach turning into confessions of fear and hope. "I'm falling for you, Jules," Matteo said one night, the waves crashing behind them. Julian's breath caught, but he couldn't say it back. Not yet. Not while his world was collapsing. Carla called on the 6th day. "Meet me at my office. You're not gonna like this." Julian and Matteo arrived, hearts racing, as Carla laid out photos, documents, and a timeline. Vanessa had never had cancer. She'd forged medical records, manipulated Julian for years, and spent his trust fund on a secret condo in Miami. Julian's knees buckled. Matteo caught him, his grip fierce. "She's not your family anymore," Matteo said softly. "We are." But Vanessa wasn't done. That night, she showed up at Julian's apartment, tears streaming, begging forgiveness. "I did it for us," she sobbed. Julian's heart wavered, until he saw the new designer purse slung over her shoulder. Rage surged. "Get out," he said, his voice cold. Vanessa's mask slipped, her face twisting with venom. "You'll regret this, Julian. You and that boy of yours." The threat hung in the air as she stormed out, leaving Julian trembling but resolute. He had Matteo, the will, and the truth. But what would Vanessa do next? Julian couldn't sleep. Vanessa's parting words echoed like a curse, and the weight of her betrayal pressed against his chest. Matteo stayed over, his steady breathing a lifeline in the dark. But even his warmth couldn't quiet the storm in Julian's mind. By morning, Julian resolved to reclaim what was his, not just the money, but his life, his freedom, his truth. Carla's investigation deepened. She uncovered Vanessa's Miami condo, purchased under a fake name, and traced Julian's trust fund to offshore accounts. "Your mom's been playing a long game," Carla said, her voice grim. "But she's sloppy. Left a paper trail a mile wide." Julian stared at the documents, each one a betrayal. Fake doctor's notes, doctored bank statements, even a forged signature of Marcus's. His father's memory, once a quiet comfort, now felt like a warning from the grave. Matteo, meanwhile, pushed Julian to fight back. "File a lawsuit," he urged, his hands gesturing wildly over breakfast at a Silver Lake diner. "She can't get away with this." Julian, still reeling, wasn't sure. Suing his own mother felt like severing the last thread of family. But Matteo's fire was infectious. "You're not alone in this, Jules. I'm here. We're here." Their fingers laced under the table, a small rebellion against the chaos. Carla connected Julian with a lawyer, Priya Sharma, a sharp 38-year-old Indian-American woman with a reputation for dismantling fraud cases. Priya's office in Century City was sleek, her demeanor calm but lethal. "We can freeze Vanessa's accounts and reclaim the trust fund," she said, flipping through Carla's evidence. "But she'll fight dirty. Be ready." Julian nodded, his jaw tight. He wasn't just fighting for money. He was fighting for the years Vanessa had stolen, the guilt she'd weaponized, the love he'd poured into her lies. Vanessa, true to form, didn't wait. 2 days later, Julian's phone lit up with texts from cousins, aunts, even old neighbors, all accusing him of abandoning his dying mother. Vanessa had launched a smear campaign, painting Julian as an ungrateful, selfish son who'd turned his back on her for his lifestyle. Social media posts, dripping with crocodile tears, spread like wildfire. "My own son chose his boyfriend over me," one post read, with a photo of Vanessa looking frail, a scarf wrapped tightly around her head. Julian's stomach twisted. She was weaponizing his identity, his love for Matteo, to rally sympathy. Matteo, furious, wanted to clap back online, but Julian stopped him. "She wants us to fight on her turf," he said, his voice steady for the first time in days. "We'll fight in court." Priya filed the lawsuit that week, charging Vanessa with fraud, theft, and emotional distress. The trust fund was frozen, and a court date was set for 6 weeks out. But Vanessa's next move blindsided them all. She showed up at Mateo's coffee shop in Echo Park, all smiles and crocodile tears, claiming she wanted to make amends. Mateo, 25 and fiercely protective, wasn't buying it. "You hurt him," he said, his voice low as customers glanced over. Vanessa leaned in, her smile venomous. "You're just a phase, honey. Julian will come back to me when you're gone." She left a business card for a family counselor who turned out to be a shady ally offering conversion therapy. Mateo tore it up, but the encounter shook him. That night, he and Julian sat on the beach, the same spot where they'd first felt something real. "She's trying to break us," Mateo said, his voice breaking. Julian pulled him close, their hands intertwined. "She won't." The lawsuit gained traction. Priya uncovered more. Vanessa had a history of scams, including a fake charity in Marcus's name that fleeced donors years ago. Julian's father had suspected her deceit, drafting the will to protect Julian after his death. "Your dad was smart," Priya said. "He knew she'd try to control you." Julian felt a pang of pride and grief for the father he'd barely known. Marcus had loved him even from beyond. But Vanessa's lies ran deeper. Carla found a man, Derek, a 50-year-old con artist in Miami, linked to Vanessa's condo. He'd been her partner in the scam, helping funnel Julian's money while posing as her caretaker. Julian and Mateo drove to confront Derek at a seedy bar in Long Beach, where he'd been spotted. The meeting was tense. Derek, slick and unapologetic, smirked as he denied everything. "Your mom's a genius," he taunted. "You're just collateral." Julian's fist clenched, but Mateo pulled him back. "He's not worth it," Mateo whispered. They left with nothing but more questions, and a growing sense that Vanessa was untouchable. As the court date loomed, Julian and Mateo grew closer, their bond a quiet defiance against Vanessa's chaos. Late-night talks turned into stolen kisses, then mornings tangled in sheets. Julian finally said it, "I love you," under a starlit sky, and Mateo's grin lit up the dark, but Vanessa's shadow lingered. A week before the trial, she vanished, her apartment empty, her phone disconnected. Julian's hope wavered. Had she won again? Vanessa's disappearance sent Julian spiraling. He and Mateo scoured her Inglewood apartment, finding only a few receipts and a photo of Julian as a kid, tucked in a drawer like an afterthought. The emptiness of the place mirrored the hole in Julian's heart. His mother, the woman he'd loved and trusted, was a ghost. But Priya, their lawyer, was undeterred. "She can run, but she can't hide forever," she said, her voice a steel blade. "We've got her accounts frozen and the law on our side." Carla, the investigator, tracked Vanessa to Miami, where she'd fled with Derek. The condo, paid for with Julian's trust fund, was now under legal scrutiny, but Vanessa was slippery. She'd been spotted at a high-end club, laughing, healthy, no scarf in sight. Julian's anger burned hotter, but so did his resolve. He wasn't just fighting for money anymore, he was fighting for justice, for his father's legacy, for the right to love Mateo without shame. The trial prep was grueling. Priya coached Julian on the stand, warning him Vanessa would play the victim. "She'll try to guilt you," Priya said. "Stay focused on the facts." Julian nodded, but the thought of facing his mother in court made his palms sweat. Mateo was his rock, cooking late-night tacos, playing soft guitar melodies to calm Julian's nerves. One evening, as they sat on Julian's balcony overlooking the city, Mateo said, "You're stronger than her, Jules. You always were." Julian kissed him, slow and certain, feeling the truth of those words settle in his bones. But Vanessa's lies kept coming. A week before the trial, a tabloid ran a story. Gay son abandons cancer-stricken mom for lover. The article, sourced to an anonymous friend, twisted Julian's life into a soap opera, complete with grainy photos of him and Matteo at the beach. Julian's cousins called, furious, believing Vanessa's narrative. The betrayal stung, but Matteo's fury was fiercer. "She's weaponizing your identity," he said, pacing. "We need to fight back, publicly." Against Priya's advice, Julian posted a raw, heartfelt video online, detailing Vanessa's fraud and his love for Matteo. "This is who I am," he said, voice steady. "And I'm done letting her lies define me." The video went viral, with thousands of strangers offering support, calling Julian brave. For the first time, he felt seen, not as Vanessa's son, but as himself. Carla's next report was a bombshell. Vanessa had forged Marcus's signature on more than the will. She'd altered life insurance documents, siphoning funds meant for Julian into her own accounts. Marcus's will, however, was ironclad, drafted with a lawyer friend who'd kept backups. "Your dad knew she was trouble," Carla said, handing Julian a letter Marcus had written years ago, sealed until now. In it, Marcus apologized for not protecting Julian sooner, urging him to live free, love fiercely. Tears streamed down Julian's face as he read, Matteo's arm around him. His father's love was a shield, even now. The trial began in a packed Los Angeles courtroom. Vanessa appeared, frail and scarf-clad, leaning on Derek like a prop. Her lawyer, a slick man named Howard, painted Julian as a greedy son exploiting his mother's illness. Julian took the stand, his voice steady as he recounted years of manipulation, the fake medical bills, the drained trust fund. Vanessa's eyes bored into him, but he didn't flinch. Matteo sat in the gallery, his presence a quiet strength. When Priya presented Carla's evidence, bank records, forged documents, photos of Vanessa partying in Miami, the courtroom gasped. Vanessa's facade cracked, her sobs unconvincing. But she wasn't done. During a recess, she cornered Julian in the hallway, her voice low and venomous. "You think you've won? I'm still your mother." Julian's heart raced, but he stood tall. "You stopped being my mother when you lied to me," he said, walking away. Matteo was waiting, his hand slipping into Julian's, grounding him. The trial resumed, and Priya tore into Vanessa's story, exposing her as a fraud. The judge's face hardened. The tide was turning. That night, Julian and Matteo celebrated quietly at a Santa Monica Pier diner, sharing fries and dreams of a future untainted by Vanessa's lies. "We're gonna make it," Matteo said, his smile bright. Julian nodded, but a text from Carla chilled him. Vanessa had fled again, skipping bail. The victory felt hollow. She was out there, scheming, and Julian knew she'd strike again. But with Matteo by his side and his father's will as his armor, he was ready for whatever came next. Vanessa's flight from justice was a gut punch, but Julian refused to break. The courtroom victory had secured his trust fund, but his mother's absence left a void no money could fill. Matteo, ever his anchor, pushed him to focus on the future. "She doesn't get to define you anymore," he said, as they walked hand in hand through Griffith Park, the LA skyline shimmering below. Julian nodded, but Vanessa's shadow loomed, a storm waiting to break. Carla tracked Vanessa to a small town in Nevada, where she'd holed up with Derek in a cheap motel. "She's desperate," Carla warned over the phone. "Desperate people do stupid things." Priya, the lawyer, pushed for an arrest warrant, but Julian's fear wasn't just about Vanessa's next move. It was about the family she'd turned against him. Aunts, uncles, cousins. They'd all bought her lies, shunning Julian for betraying her. The isolation stung, But Mateo's love was a lifeline. One night, as they cooked dinner in Julian's apartment, Mateo proposed a bold idea. Let's start over somewhere new. Just us. Julian's heart raced at the thought. But could he leave everything behind? The answer came faster than he expected. Vanessa resurfaced, not with an apology but with a new scam. She'd launched a crowdfunding campaign, claiming Julian's lawsuit had left her homeless and dying. The page, filled with old photos of her and Julian, raised thousands in days. Julian's viral video had swayed many, but some still believed her, sending hate mail accusing him of cruelty. "She's using my face to lie," Julian told Priya, his voice tight. Priya acted fast, getting the campaign shut down, but the damage was done. Vanessa's lies had painted Julian as a villain in his own community. Mateo, furious, rallied their friends, a tight-knit group of artists and dreamers from LA's queer scene. They organized a community event at a West Hollywood bar, where Julian shared his story in person. The room, packed with strangers and supporters, erupted in applause as he spoke of his father's will, his love for Mateo, and his fight for truth. A trans woman named Lena, 30, with a warm smile, approached after. "You're not alone," she said, sharing her own story of family betrayal. Others followed, their stories weaving a tapestry of resilience. Julian felt a spark of hope. He was building a new family, one bound by truth, not blood. Carla's next update was grim. Vanessa and Derek had been spotted in San Diego, trying to access frozen accounts through a shady lawyer. Priya filed charges for bail jumping, and the FBI got involved, tracking Vanessa's movements. Julian, meanwhile, grappled with guilt. Had he pushed her too far? Mateo saw the doubt in his eyes and pulled him close. "You didn't make her lie, Jules. She chose this." They kissed, the world fading away, and Julian knew Mateo was right. He couldn't save Vanessa, but he could save himself. The turning point came unexpectedly. A distant cousin, Amara, 22, reached out, apologizing for believing Vanessa. She'd found old letters from Marcus, hidden in her parents' attic, detailing Vanessa's scams even before Julian was born. "Your dad tried to warn us," Amara said, tearful, over coffee in Pasadena. "I'm sorry we didn't listen." The letters were a gift, proof of Marcus's love and foresight. Julian shared them with Priya, who used them to strengthen the case. The tide was turning, but Vanessa was still out there, a ghost in the wind. As the FBI closed in, Julian and Mateo planned their future. They dreamed of moving to Portland, starting a small design and music studio, free from Vanessa's reach. One night, under the stars at Griffith Observatory, Mateo got down on one knee, not with a ring, but with a promise. "Marry me, Jules. Not today, but someday. Let's build a life." Julian's tears fell as he nodded, the weight of his past lifting. They were more than lovers, they were partners, warriors, survivors. But Vanessa's final act was coming. Carla called with news. Vanessa had been arrested in a San Diego motel, Derek in cuffs beside her. The evidence was overwhelming. Forged documents, stolen funds, even a fake passport. Julian felt no joy, only a hollow relief. The trial's second phase loomed, and he'd have to face her again. But with Mateo's hand in his, Marcus's will in his heart, and a new family rallying behind him, Julian was ready. The truth was his weapon, and he'd wield it without fear. The San Diego courtroom was cold, sterile, a stark contrast to the fire in Julian's chest as he faced Vanessa one last time. She sat across the room, no scarf, no pretense, just a woman stripped bare by her own lies. Mateo's hand brushed his, a silent vow. We're in this together. The truth had brought them here, and it would carry them forward, no matter what came next. The trial's second phase was brutal. Vanessa's lawyer, Howard, doubled down. painting her as a desperate mother driven to extremes by poverty. But Priya was relentless, presenting Marcus's letters, Amara's testimony, and Carla's evidence of Vanessa's scams spanning decades. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s, listened as Julian took the stand, his voice steady but heavy with grief. "I loved her," he said, eyes locked on Vanessa. "I gave her everything, my money, my trust, my heart. And she lied." Vanessa looked away, her face unreadable, but the courtroom felt the weight of his words. Derek, Vanessa's accomplice, turned on her, striking a plea deal to save himself. He detailed their scheme: Vanessa's fake cancer, the forged documents, the Miami condo. The jury's faces hardened as he spoke, and Julian saw his mother shrink, her charisma gone. When Vanessa testified, her sobs felt hollow, her excuses flimsy. "I did it for Julian," she claimed, but the jury wasn't swayed. After 3 days of deliberation, they delivered the verdict: guilty on all counts, fraud, theft, and perjury. Vanessa was sentenced to 7 years, her assets seized to repay Julian's trust fund. The courtroom emptied, but Julian lingered, watching as Vanessa was led away in cuffs. She glanced back, her eyes pleading for a moment, but he turned away. The boy who'd nursed her through cancer was gone. In his place stood a man, forged by betrayal but strengthened by love. Mateo pulled him close, whispering, "You did it, Jules. You're free." The aftermath was quiet but profound. Julian reclaimed the trust fund, using it to buy a small house in Portland, where he and Mateo moved months later. The Berkeley house from Marcus's will become a rental, its income funding a scholarship for queer youth escaping toxic families. Julian's viral video inspired others, sparking a movement of stories shared under truth over lies. Lena, the trans woman from the bar, became a close friend, joining their chosen family alongside Amara and others who'd rallied behind them. Vanessa wrote from prison, a letter full of apologies and excuses. Julian read it once, then burned it, the ashes scattering in the Oregon wind. He didn't need her words anymore. Marcus's letter, the one urging him to live free, love fiercely, hung framed in their new home, a reminder of the father who'd protected him even in death. Julian and Mateo built their studio, blending graphic design and music, their days filled with laughter, art, and the promise of forever. One evening, as they walked along the Willamette River, Mateo stopped, pulling Julian close. The sunset painted the sky in hues of pink and gold, mirroring the beach where their love had first bloomed. "We made it," Mateo said, his voice thick with emotion. Julian nodded, tears in his eyes, and kissed him, the world fading to just them. Vanessa's lies had tried to break them, but they'd built something stronger: truth, love, and a life unapologetically theirs. The story didn't end in the courtroom. It lived in Julian's courage, in Mateo's unwavering support, in the community they'd found and the one they'd built. It lived in the scholarship kids who'd write to Julian, thanking him for a chance at freedom. It lived in every moment they chose love over fear, truth over lies. Marcus's will had exposed Vanessa's betrayal, but it was Julian's heart, and Mateo's, that wrote the ending. A life reclaimed, a love unbroken, and a future boundless with hope.